of Passover. Okay, so let's talk a little bit tonight about Pesach and get a little bit of maybe a deeper vision of what's happening in it. So, number one, we have to realize that Hashem took us out of Egypt 3,300 years ago. We were slaves in Egypt for 210 years. We came down, we came down to Egypt, we came down as guests of the Egyptians. That we came down, Yosef was the viceroy, so to speak, and he invited Jacob to come down with all of the brothers. And the brothers basically settled in Egypt, and that's where the Jewish nation was born. We were born in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. God had told Abraham that there was going to be a slavery, and God in His infinite mercy made the slavery only 210 years. So we were in Egypt for 210 years. The first 100 years we were there was very good. We were treated very, very well. The last 100 years it began to progressively get worse and worse and worse until it resulted in the terrible aspect of the plagues and the slavery as we know it. Now, it's interesting. Being in Egypt and being slaves really was all part of God's plan. That to create a nation which is dedicated to God, God first had to put us in a place where we would realize how much we need God. In other words, God had to form us. Hashem had to form us as a nation. And it says that as we were in Egypt, we were really sinking. We were really sinking. We were becoming very much like the Egyptian. Very much like the Egyptian. That's why we had to make certain decrees. They said we're not supposed to change our names, our language, our address. And we didn't. We kept Jewish names, Shlomo and Shimon and Reuven. We spoke Hebrew. We dressed like Jews. That means we dressed a certain level of tzniut, modesty, and elegance, even though we were slaves. But Hashem wanted us to be slaves, so to speak, so that He could redeem us, and we'll be indebted to no one but Hashem. And that's actually one of the themes we're going to see in the Haggadah on Passover. Hashem, you took us out, so now we're only indebted to you. We're a nation that you created. Now, it's interesting that while we were in Egypt, as we were coming out, God gave us 3 commandments to do. What were those 3 commandments? Does anybody know? Even before we left Egypt, God gave us 3 of the 613 commandments. What were those first? What were those 3? Take a guess?
Keep kosher?
Nope, keep kosher later after we receive the Torah. Now what happened? When we came out of Egypt, right, we were 49 days in the desert, we went to Har Sinai, we got the Torah. But as we're leaving Egypt, as the slavery is coming to an end, and it was a very, very, very difficult, painful slavery, it's coming to an end, and God is performing the 10 plagues, and really decimating the Egyptians, but He gives us 3 commandments. What are those 3 commandments? Let me tell you what they were. The first one was a commandment which we call Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh means, God tells us, Jews, you're about to leave Egypt right now. Slavery is going to come to an end. You're going to be free. Oh, Jews, here it goes. Change your calendars. Change your calendars? That's the first thing you have to tell us. We're about to become a free nation, and God says, change your calendar? Well, why is that? You know why is that? Because in Egypt, the calendar was the calendar which depended on the sun. The revolution of the earth around the sun. God says, first thing you have to do is change your calendar to a calendar whereby you're going to determine your months by the moon's rotation around the earth. Now, why is that? What's so important about changing your calendar? I would think the first commandment should be something a little more intense, like believe in God. I don't know. Something, what? The Sabbath, something like that, one of the 10 commandments. God says, no, first thing, change your calendars. What's the idea? Let me explain the idea. The idea of a solar calendar. What's a solar calendar? Listen carefully. Solar calendar is the revolution of the earth around the sun. It takes 365 days. It's always going to be the same, day in and day out. The sun is going to rise, the sun is going to set. There's no difference. 365 days of the same thing. That's why in Hebrew, by the word for year is shana, which depends on the rotation of the earth around the sun. It's the same word in Hebrew as shinun, which means repetition. Because it happens over and over and over again. And let me tell you something. Religions that follow the sun as the basis of their calendar tend to believe in something called predestination. What does predestination mean? Predestination means you're born a certain way, you're born in a way, and you cannot break out of who you are. Your life has already been planned out. It's called predestination. It's been predetermined. It's already happened. You know why? Because if you follow the sun, there's no change in the sun. The earth goes around the sun in the exact same way every day. No change. Things are without change. And it's interesting that religions that do follow the sun calendar tend to believe that, just like there's no change in the earth's rotation around the sun, I can't change myself. I'm born in a certain way, and I'm locked into who I am. Do you hear that? Hear that? It's called predestination, predetermination. Christianity, on some level, believes in that. Now, that's a scary thing, predetermination. You know why? Because it means that, what's my purpose? If I can't change who I am, then what's the whole point of life? God says no. God said, listen, Jews, first thing is change your calendar. I want you to follow the moon. Because what's the moon? The moon is the rotation of the moon around the earth. It takes 356 days, 11-day difference. But the moon is constantly changing. For wherever you're standing on planet Earth and you're looking at the moon is always going to be different. The first day of the month, you're going to see a little sliver. By the 15th of the month, there's going to be a full moon. 16th of the month, it's going to start going down and disappear. The moon's always changing. It's always in flux. So Hashem is symbolizing something very deep to us. Hashem is saying, just like the moon changes, your job in this world is to change yourself. Who you were yesterday is not going to be who you'll be tomorrow. Lesson number one God has to teach us, as we're becoming a free nation. We're going to become a nation that were slaves in Egypt, a nation now which is moving from slavery to freedom. And what's freedom? We're going to define it in a few minutes, but freedom means we're going to be a holy nation. First thing you have to understand is you are not locked into who you were yesterday at all. There's no such thing as anything being predetermined in your life. Nothing. No predetermination. That's why you have to follow the moon. The moon symbolizes change. It symbolizes things can be different. What was yesterday will not be tomorrow. And that's what you have to know. That's rule number one God has to teach us. That we are not the people we were yesterday. We have the power to completely transform ourselves daily. It's a very, very important thought, Because it's so easy in life to feel, I'm hopeless. I was a failure yesterday, I'll be a failure today. We tend to think those thoughts often. And they're really thoughts that are contrary to who we are. Just like we're constantly shedding molecules daily. We're constantly in flux in terms of the molecular structure of who we are. True. So too we can change our spiritual quality daily. We're never locked into the past. And that's what the moon symbolizes. It's interesting, in Judaism we have so many things that speak to this. In the morning, for example, when we get up in the morning, the first mitzvah that we do is a mitzvah where we wash the Netilat Yadayim. True? You take water. Why water? Because water is always in motion. It's moving. Water never wants to be at rest. Water always wants to change and to keep moving around. Right? That's the power of water. Take water, the force of movement, and wash your hands 6 times. We'll take your right hand first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up to the wrist. And what's the idea behind it? 2 things. One idea, in the morning it says that sleep is a function of death. Why? Because when we sleep, our free choice is limited. And life is about free choice. So therefore, when we're sleeping and our free choice is limited, on some level we've been dead. Some people sleep so deeply it's like they're dead, but really what it means is their free choice is limited. That's really what it means. Another reason why we wash in the morning is because we're a new creation every morning. We're absolutely new people. It's like we're given life for the first time. So we're sanctifying this new being, so to speak. Like they used to go out to ships and they hit the ship with a bottle of champagne for its maiden voyage. We're washing our hands as if to say we're starting all over again. And it's a very powerful thought, because the greatest weapon against growing and changing is the belief that I'm locked into patterns. And that's what we have to fight. We have to get up in the morning and say, I'm a new person. And that's what God is saying to us as a nation. God is saying, now I'm going to make you a holy nation. But you have to start using the moon as your guide. Because the moon is something which is changing. Just like it changes, you can change. That's why the holiday that celebrates each new month, what's it called? Rosh Chodesh, which really means the beginning of chidush. Chidush in Hebrew means renewal. The beginning of renewal. It's not just the renewal of the moon. It's the idea that we can renew ourselves and be different people. So the first thing God has to say to us as we're getting ready to go out of Egypt, Jews, change your calendars. Change is possible. You don't have to be locked into a slave nation. What you wore yesterday is not going to be here tomorrow. Now it's interesting. Second mitzvah that we get is the mitzvah of matzah. Matzah was commanded to be eaten even while we were in Egypt. Now we don't always know that. God commanded to make matzah while we were in Egypt. Now wait a minute, I thought we ate matzah because we didn't have time to let the dough rise, because we were in such great haste to leave, and therefore we're remembering the going out like that. But the commandment to make matzah was given in Egypt. It just so happened God caused it to coincide in a way that, like, as God's saying, make the matzah, He said, okay, go. So the matzah didn't have time to rise, and it rose and just was on our backs. It was the bread we were making as we were leaving. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the commandment to eat matzah was given in Egypt. That must mean that there's more to matzah than just being a memorial to how we left Egypt. There must be something about matzah which is essential spiritual ingredient to becoming a free nation and a holy nation. So what is it about matzah that is so spiritual? I mean, is there something spiritual about matzah? It's not the taste, is it? And if you want taste, get that big tandoori bread. Get those umbrella breads. What are those called? The umbrella breads there. Nanki. If you want taste, you go with those. I'll tell you, ever since Bukharian Jewry came to Queens in 1990 something, I cannot eat any bread except tandoori bread. I mean, I love tandoori bread. I love it. I love it. It's unbelievable. I love Bukharian food, but we're not going to talk about it now. But it's we're not eating it for taste. We're not eating it for its digestive qualities. We're not eating matzah for its digestive capacity, right? In fact, it's not so good for digestion, right? What are we eating it for then? What are we doing? Why are we eating matzah? Let's analyze it for a moment. I'll share something so beautiful with you. What's that? To remember how we went out of Egypt? So, you have to eat the matzah, no? Good. What's your first name again? Rafal. That's a good point, except I just pointed out that God gave the command to eat matzah while we were in Egypt. Everyone gets confused on that one. While we were still in Egypt, as we were getting ready to leave, God says, okay, commandment to make matzah. So there has to be something about matzah that's not only a memorial to the leaving, but there must be something intrinsically spiritual about matzah. Yeah, Yui? Sonny? Oh, Sonny said something very good. Sonia said something very good. Yeah, it is going to foreshadow something. Hold that thought for a moment. It's a beautiful thought. Hold it for 1 second. Let's analyze for a second. What's the difference between matzah and bread?
How much time you leave? One rises, one doesn't.
Oh, okay. Very good. Let's analyze the recipe. Here's a recipe. I'm going to give you a recipe for bread. The recipe for bread is you take flour, you take water, and you take... Well, supposing you don't put yeast into the bread, what happens? Well, the reality is that yeast is a bacteria. Okay. Right. Pharmacy majors or medical students, listen carefully. If you're a liberal arts person like I was, just you could tune out a little bit during this part of the speech. But listen carefully. It's not so complicated. There's bacteria everywhere. Right? There's bacteria in water. There's bacteria in the air. And the reality is, when you combine water with any of the 5 grains, wheat, spelt, oats, rye, and barley, the combination of the water and any of those wheats and the bacteria which is in the air or in the water will produce a chemical reaction which will result in carbon dioxide, and it's the carbon dioxide, the CO2, that causes the rise. Now, if you want a really good bread, we try to stimulate that rise. So what do? We throw in a heavy-duty bacteria called yeast. But you can make bread without yeast. The recipe for bread is, listen carefully, flour, water, and time. Flour, water, and time. What happens if flour touches water and it sits for 18 minutes, there will be a rise. You will have a chemical reaction, you will have CO2, carbon dioxide, and you will get chametz, you will get a rise. It's called leaven. That's the definition for bread, the recipe for bread. Flour, water, and time, 18 minutes. Matzah is flour, water, and no time. How do we get rid of the time factor? It's very interesting. If you go to a matzah factory, the way they do it, as soon as you touch the flour to the water, it's almost a stopwatch goes like that, literally. And they have to start kneading it down, start making it flat, get it onto those big sticks, get into the oven, get it out of the oven, all within an 18-minute period. Because if you go beyond 18 minutes, there might be some rise. So what's matzah? Matzah is flour, water, and we take out the ingredient of time. We don't let it rise. We don't let that chemical reaction take place. That's the recipe for matzah. And it's very difficult to do. It's very hard. That's why when you see these matzah factories, it's almost funny, because it's such motion. Back and forth, back and forth. What do you do with bread? You let it sit, slow, you let it rise, right? But when it comes to matzah, it's alacrity, it's result, it's intensity. Now what's going on? What's the spiritual message that God's trying to teach us? Some beautiful, beautiful messages. Message number one is that it's natural to let things rise. That's natural, right? Flour will touch water. There is bacteria in the air or in the water. Time will take effect and you'll have a rise. You'll have CO2, you'll have carbon dioxide, it will rise. That's natural. It's not natural to prevent that rise. First lesson of matzah is that if you want to be free, you have to control what's natural. What does that mean? Just like you have to control what's natural in terms of preventing the rise to take place, if you really want to be free, you have to realize that we have a lot of qualities about ourselves that are natural, but if we're really going to be free, we have to be in control of our nature. What does that mean? You look at a human being, sometimes we ask ourselves a question, what are we? We have so many things that resemble the animal. Right? We like to eat, we like to sleep, we enjoy foods, we enjoy pleasures, we like to rest, we like to sometimes win at things and be competitive and run, and at the same time, we seem to like and enjoy other things. We love to give charity. We need to pray. We feel really good when we help other people. We seem to have this need for meaning in our lives. So what are we? Are we animal or are we soul? What are we? The answer is, we are the perfect fusion of both. We happen to be souls that have bodies. Not bodies that have souls. We're souls that happen to have bodies. But there's a fight between those two. There's a tension always in our lives. And there's a tension as we speak right now. Should I listen to Rabbi Kraft or should I go up for another piece of cake? Right? That's the tension between the animal and the soul. It's happening as we talk. Matzah says something to us. Matzah says, you know what? Freedom is when your soul rules your body, not when your body rules your soul. It's natural to be an animal. That's just natural. It's natural just to want to eat what you want to eat. It's not natural to wait 6 hours between milk and meat. It's natural to smell pepperoni pizza and say, oh, I have to buy a slice. It's fighting my nature to say, I'm going to walk by it. Right? It's natural to look at the price of non-kosher chicken and say, hey, look at this, this looks pretty cheap, It's unnatural to say, wait a minute, I'm going to give more money to buy this one because it's kosher. It's natural when I feel angry to lash out. It's unnatural to say, I'm going to fight myself and control myself. It's natural to say, look, I want to keep my money for me. I worked hard for it. It's mine. It's unnatural to say, I'm going to reach into my pocket and I'm going to give it to you. if we're really going to be free, we have to break out and rule over our nature. And that's the battle of life. That's how it says our father, the rabbis say in Ethics of the Father, they say, it says, Ezu ben chorin, who's a free person? It says, Misha misgabel yitzro, someone who prevails over his passions, prevails over the animal inside himself. That's a difficult fight in life. It's not so easy. That's one of the messages of matzah, is you have to rule over nature. You have to rule over it. That's why I always say this word. I've been saying it all year. If you've heard it before, I apologize. If you haven't heard it, it's a great word. That what's a tzaddik? What's a righteous person in Hebrew? Tzaddik. What's the definition of a tzaddik? What?
Tzedakah.
Tzedakah is from the word tzidkut, but what's the definition? Give me a definition, a working definition of a tzaddik, a tzaddikat. What would be a working definition? Give me a definition. Definition?
One who gives to others.
Good. Definitely. Part of being a tzaddik.
One who performs mitzvahs.
Done the mitzvahs, definitely. I had a friend in the yeshiva. This guy was a tzaddik. I love this guy. I used to watch him just to observe what he does. Sometimes if you play basketball, guys, right, you just want to watch Michael Jordan. Just to see how he does things, right? Just got to watch him. If you want to grow spiritually, you have to watch people. You have to look to see what they do. I used to love to watch this guy because look at this. Look at this. This guy, he used to tell the younger students, when you're going out with a girl, before you take her out on a date, you have to go to the restaurant and try out the chairs. That's what he used to tell you. You have to find the table, which is the most comfortable table, and the chairs that are the most comfortable chairs. And those are the table you have to reserve, and you have to make sure you get it. So that's your obligation on a date. That's what he used to tell people. That's a tzaddik. He would leave his busy schedule, and he would go to the restaurant to check out the tables and chairs. Like, my wife was lucky if she got, she was lucky if she got dessert. He's checking out the tables and chairs. You're not born that way. How did he become that way? So it's interesting. If you look at the word tzaddik in the microscope of the Hebrew language, you see an interesting thing. That the letter kuf in Hebrew, what does the letter kuf mean? The letter kuf means a monkey. The letter kuf in Hebrew means a monkey. We have a letter in the Hebrew alphabet that means monkey. Tzad in Hebrew, latzud, tzad dalet together, listen carefully. Tzad means to trap. For example, one thing you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, it's sayad, is hunt, or trap. You can't let something run in and make a fence around it. That's called trapping. Tzad means a side, a trap. What's a tzaddik? Listen carefully. What does kuf mean? The letter kuf means a monkey. What does the two-letter root mean, tzad? What does it mean? To trap. So what's a tzaddik? Put it together. Somebody who traps his monkey. Somebody who rules over the animal and who he is. He controls his nature. He doesn't let his nature rule him. He rules over his nature. That's a tzaddik. And that's one of the lessons of matzah. One of the lessons of matzah is, you got to fight nature. It's natural to let things rise. It's unnatural to keep it down. But that's part of what it means to grow spiritually. So God commands the mitzvah of matzah while we're in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. Because there's a spiritual message in the matzah. Message number one is the message, you have to rule over nature. Another message of matzah is, our enemy in this world. Who is our enemy in this world? We all have the same common enemy. The Yetzer Hara is we're fighting the Yetzer Hara. But something we're all fighting externally to ourselves is, what we're fighting? We're fighting the clock. We're fighting time. Time is our enemy. God gives us a certain amount of time in this existence, in this union between body and soul, X number of years. We hope it will be 120 years. But we don't know. Sometimes it's much less. We're fighting the clock. There used to be a television show in the olden days in America called Beat the Clock. Beat the clock. They turn the clock going and you have to do all these funny tasks within a certain amount of time. That's really a metaphor to what life is about. We're fighting the clock. We have to accomplish the mission of giving back to Hashem a neshama which is greater than He gave us. That's our goal. That's our job in this world. What does matzah say? You know what matzah says? Matzah says you have to fight the clock. You know, if you're just going to let things sit, you're going to get chametz. You have to say, the clock is my enemy. I have to work with speed and alacrity and zrizut to make matzah. I have to remember that the clock sometimes is my enemy. Got to work hard. And it's very interesting. You look at matzah. It's a very subtle difference between matzah and chametz. If you go over 19 minutes, you have chametz. Right? 18 minutes, you have matzah. Very subtle. You got to fight that clock. You have to work against time. You have to remember that sometimes we tend to think that life is going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. But if you want to be great, you want to grow spiritually, God's telling us you got to eat matzah. Matzah is a spiritual food. It's a food that says beat the clock. Fight time. Another message of matzah is we have to remember that there are so many things in this world that are illusions. What does that mean? Illusions mean that we tend to think, if I'll be rich, that's going to make me so happy, right? If I get a really nice car, I'm going to be so happy. If I buy this house over there, I'm going to be so happy. If I go on this vacation, I'm going to be so happy. Right? We look at life, we say, look what he has, look what she has. A lot of illusions in life. Our job in this world is to break through those illusions. Bread is a bread of illusion. Why is that? What's false about bread? Bread is really just flour and water. But you know what makes it rise? Hot air. All it is something that doesn't really exist. Bread is a food that says, I'm not really real. There's just hot air keeping me up. That's an illusion. What's matzah? Matzah is the food of reality. It's bread and water and no air. No rise. It is what it is. It's honest. It's taking two things and saying this is exactly what's there. The message, of course, is the message that says, look at life and break through the illusions of life and find the reality of life. What's the greatest illusion of life? The greatest illusion of life is that God doesn't exist. God's not really there for us. The greatest reality of life is that God is everything. Matzah says, look for reality. I'm reality bread. I'm just bread and water and no hot air. Very interesting. Break through in life and see reality. Another spiritual message of matzah. It's interesting, our rabbis describe this also, that bread is a food of arrogance. Why arrogance? What's arrogance? Arrogance, gava. Gava, sometimes we call it hot air. This person is filled with hot air. What does it mean to be filled with hot air? It means to think you're something more than you're not. What's humility? Humility is matzah, right? Matzah is, there's no hot air. But you know what humility really is? Humility isn't that I'm a nobody. Humility is I honestly see who and what I am. For example, if Michael Jordan were to get up and say, look, I'm a terrible basketball player, that wouldn't be humility, that would be stupidity. Humility would be to say, I happen to be a great basketball player, but 99.9% of it was given to me by God. He gave me the body, He gave me the tools, He gave me the coordination, He gave me the strength, He gave me the speed, He gave me the mind to work the parts together. And I worked at them, and I used the things He gave me, and I tried to accomplish something. That's reality. Moshe Rabbeinu is called the greatest man who ever lived, and he's called the humblest man who ever lived. If you speak to Moshe Rabbeinu shouldn't say, I'm not a great person. He should say, I'm a tremendously great person. But God gave me the talents, and maybe if God gave you the talents that He gave me, you'd be greater than me. That's honesty. That's humility. So bread is a bread of arrogance, falseness, rise, hot air. Matzah is the food of honesty. real humility is being honest with yourself, looking at your talents and strengths, saying, this is what I am, but God gave it to me. It's a bread that says, look for reality. It's a bread that says, don't focus on the illusions of life, but see what's real. It's a very spiritual food. Yeah. 2 minutes. Yeah. 2 minutes. Right.
Why don't we eat matzah or lamb?
That's a great question. Great question. Why do we only eat it for 1 week? Simple answer is because our stomachs won't be able to tolerate it. Deeper answer is maybe we couldn't tolerate it. Matzah is a week of spiritual chemotherapy. It's Jewish, right? It's Jewish chemotherapy. That's the best description. For 1 week, we're going to get rid of arrogance and falseness, and we're going to focus. To maintain that level of intensity and focus for the rest of the year would be very difficult. Maybe we wouldn't be able to do it. For 1 week, we could do it. And that's why for 1 week, it's okay to go a little bit Meshugana. You could be a little Meshugana on Pesach. What do you mean by Meshugana? Right? Everyone know the word Meshugana? How do you translate Meshugana? Crazy. You can be a little bit crazy from, during the, did I say it correctly in B'chayin?
Yeah, they wanna.
Did I say it right? They wanna? If you speak to Rabbi Nissanov at any time during the year and you ask him, how should I grow? He's going to tell you, he's going to say, please, grow slowly and steadily. That's going to tell you. He's going to tell it to you, please grow slowly. And a person says, look, no, I want to put on a white shirt and, and a black jacket and a fancy black hat. Rabbi Nissan is going to tell you, please, just be normal. Put on a nice, good-looking shirt and, just be you. Right? Am I right? 100%. However, on Pesach, we go a little bit nuts. We take on stringencies. And it's okay. It's okay to be a little bit crazy. You know why? Because only for 1 week. And it's spiritual chemotherapy. We're getting rid of the arrogance. We're getting rid of the falseness. We're focusing on truth. We're focusing on what's real about life. So it's okay for 1 week. But I don't think we could do it for the whole year. It would be too much for us. But we're supposed to, of course, take the lesson and bring it and apply it for the whole year. Let me give you one more point about matzah, and I think a very beautiful point. And it's something that Sonia alluded to a moment ago. It's interesting, at the Seder, we eat certain foods to commemorate certain things. For example, maror, the bitter herb, what's that commemorating?
Bitterness.
That's commemorating, right, the bitterness of the slavery. Right? We made our lives bitter in Egypt. That's why it's supposed to taste bitter. And that's why the halacha is that if you don't taste it, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. If you put it in some sort of capsule and swallowed it, you haven't done the mitzvah. You got to feel the bitterness. You got to chew it. You got to taste it. We have charoset. We have a combination of raisins and apples and wine. You do that, as you say? The charoset, right? What does that symbolize? That symbolizes the bricks, right? The bricks, again, the slavery of Egypt. We drink 4 cups of wine. 4 cups of wine. What does that symbolize? Right? The 4 languages of redemption. The 4 languages that God uses when He took us out of Mitzrayim. So we drink 4 cups of wine to symbolize freedom. It's freedom. Wine's about freedom. That's why we're supposed to drink a good quality wine. Don't use grape juice. Use good wine. Red wine. Especially good wine. Nice wine. We lean at the Seder. Why do we lean? Because we're kings. We're free. Free people lean. The older days, time of the Talmud, we used to lean. We don't do that, but that's what we do. It's lean to the left. Why the left, not the right?
Because you want.
Very good. That's right. Because the veshet, the epiglottis, is only is closed to the left. Even to the right, it would open and it go down the pipe. You could aspirate, I believe. But we lean because we're free. Question: matzah, is it freedom or slavery? Slavery, because it's a lechemoni, it's a poor man's bread. It was the type of bread that we ate while we were in Egypt. Good. But wait a minute. At the same time, we say that matzah is the bread of freedom. It's the lechem shel cherut. It's what we eat for freedom. So what's matzah? Is it slavery or freedom? Oh, interesting. Everything else at the Seder is clearly one or the other, but matzah is both. What's the idea? Hashem takes us out of Egypt in a way that the bread which symbolizes the freedom was the exact bread that we were eating while we were slaves. The lechem oni becomes the poor man's bread, the bread of slavery becomes the bread of redemption. There's a very powerful spiritual message in this. The message, Sforno seems to say it a little bit, the message seems to be that things in life that we think are bad, one day Hashem is going to turn those things around, boom, 180 degrees, and the exact thing that we thought was bad is going to be the thing which is the greatest thing we've ever seen. The bread that we ate while we were slaves, matzah, the reason we ate matzah in Egypt, why? Because we didn't have time. We were always working. We didn't have time to let it rise. Just have to get your bread, you have to put your, you have to just get your flour and your water and put it there and eat it. You don't have time to sit, let it rise. What does God do? God redeems us in a way with the commandment to make matzah. He says, make your matzah. As we're making it, He says, go. We put it on our backs. It doesn't have time to rise. And we're redeemed through it. Now, what's the message? The message is the exact food, which was the food that symbolized slavery, becomes the food that symbolizes freedom. The message God is teaching us, such a powerful message. The things in life that we think are the source of tragedy and suffering and pain, one day, when the redemption arises, we're going to realize that those things were exactly the opposite. They were so good for us and so beneficial for us, so helpful for us. We're not going to be able to understand, was it painful or was it good? God's going to turn it around 180 degrees, and what we thought is painful is going to be good. It's a beautiful, beautiful message to take with us. So those are the points we want to bring out tonight, and Rabbi Nisanov is going to speak now a little bit about the more halachic aspects of the Seder and of the whole time period of Pesach and preparation for Passover. But let's try to keep these messages clear. Number one, first mitzvah is the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. To be free, to be godly, to be holy, you have to believe that you can change. Just like the moon changes, you can change. And we have to believe that about ourselves. You have to believe it. It's essential. It's belief number one. We have to understand that matzah is a food that teaches us so many lessons about life. Right? The lesson that we have to rule over nature. We have to rule over the animal of who we are. To be a tzaddik means to fight what's natural. We have to realize that time is our enemy. We have to realize that humility is looking at reality. And matzah focuses us to see what's real in life. To stay away from illusion. And ultimately to realize that the things in life which we think are the source of pain, one day we're going to realize the source of our greatest joy. Thank you for listening, everybody. Without any further ado, Harav Shlomo Nisanov.
Thank you very much.
I should really just say one word. I'm sorry about this one. I really should be very remiss. Rabbi Nisanov, excuse me, Shlomo, I have to say a few words.
I could leave.
Rabbi Nisanov, I have to say a few words about him. A very, very close friend of mine. And, you don't remember these years in Queens, but there was a time in Queens when very little was happening spiritually in the Bukharian community. Right now, Baruch Hashem, a lot is happening. I think it's almost a revolution. And it's a beautiful revolution. It's unbelievable. So many young people are coming back and learning Torah. There was a time when there was really only a handful of people leading the way. And one of the leaders of that movement was this gentleman over here, Rabbi Shlomo Nisanov, who at a young age got permission from his Rosh Yeshiva, one of the greatest Rosh Yeshivas in America, to come to Queens and to establish a community center, which is going to be a synagogue, it's going to be a place of learning, it's going to be a place of chesed and kindness, and to start working to help bring Torah and secure Torah in the Bukharian community which was coming to America. So that's what Rabbi Nisanov has accomplished over the last, I think now, 18 years? 18 years. That's a fantastic accomplishment. And to start something when no one else is doing it is one of the great things in life. And the truth of the matter, Hashem says, when you begin something and other people follow you, you know what happens? You get credit for it all. It says you take schar kulam, like Avram Avinu. You take schar kulam. You take credit, you get all the credit.